So I've been looking at this. It actually has been waiting for quite a while. I think like a month. This person has been waiting for their critique, so they've been quite patient. Um, so I have to take a look at that. Excuse me, FLV. Okay, pen pressure is okay. All right. So for this piece, my main issue with it is some form issues. Like you have some form inconsistencies. What that means is that when you painted the face and painted the body, you painted it by piecing together things that you remember about that area of the body instead of approaching it through a more um, scientific, I guess, approach where you're thinking about the symmetry, the function, the form, the cast shadows. You're piecing things together um, as if you are painting what a human looks like in your head versus what a human looks like out there. So you are not investing enough importance into your references. References are needed no matter what skill level you're ever going to reach. References are necessary. It doesn't matter if you are the biggest guy in the industry or just a noob starting out. I don't like to use the word noob, but that serves the purpose right now. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or an advanced. You have to use references. You cannot skip your references. Okay? So can everybody see everything okay? Is someone having a glitch? Yes? Okay. So for this, the biggest issue on the head piece is that the parting in the hairline doesn't match the actual altitude, the high point of the sphere of the head. So you threw it on as a unit and as a symbol of, a hair accessory instead of wrapping it around a form structure. So the skeletal structure is form, and the anything on top of the head is an accessory. So it has to wrap around the density of the skeletal structure and the muscle and the skin and the fat on top of that skeletal structure. So you have to remember that anything you're adding on top of anything hard, so if you have a rock and then you have some fabric, when that fabric falls on the rock, it will take the shape of the rock, it will inherit the shadows of the rock, the light points of the rock. It won't inherit the textures though. Of course it'll overlap the texture, but essentially it will inherit the actual shape. So where you had yours before, just as a before and after, where you had yours before, it kind of seemed like the head flattened out, and after, now it's wrapping around the high point of the head, where the headpiece is sitting on top of the sphere of the head. So you've got the sphere, you've got the symmetry lines, and this is the symmetry line, and this is where the hair parting would have been. So if you had thought about the sphere and you had drawn your symmetry lines, then you would not have made this mistake. It's a very, very big mistake. It means you're not thinking like you should be about the shapes. The shapes always need to be considered before you do anything. The largest shadows, the largest color washes, the largest cast shadows, the most protruding areas, the highest points, the lowest points, all of these large shadows need to be taken care of early on. So if you're not taking care of that, then you're going to have these big sore thumb, they're going to stick out like a sore thumb mistakes, even if you're rendered perfectly. Some of you think that if you render the image and you finish it and it looks really pretty and it's sparkling and it's done, that your biggest mistakes won't be visible anymore because everyone's going to be too distracted by the pretty eyes. It's absolutely wrong thinking. It doesn't matter how much you render it, the mistake will come out. Alright? So is everyone with me? What essentially did I just say? What am I essentially talking about right now? Structure first. Anything else? Rendering can make an illusion of a finished piece. Exactly. Rendering can also create the illusion that you are, thinking about all the fundamental shapes and structure. It will really, really show if you have a structure problem. It'll show right away. There is no way to shortcut your way out of thinking about this. And it's not even a tough stage. It's not even a difficult thing to think about. It's just one shape, one little shadow. So basically, in everything you're ever going to draw, there's always going to be that underlying shape. And if you think about that shape and its core shadow, where that core shadow is pointing to, and your reflective light, all of that stuff, if you take care of it early, what it will be like. It will be like a solid plate, an insurance that you can depend on when it comes down to the form. When you zoom out, some of you have problems. When you zoom out of your painting, it still looks odd. Some artists, when you zoom out, it still reads. So something that promises a painting will read is taking care of the structure first. So what do you think I mean when I say read? What does that mean? Details after basics, absolutely, Kuro. So what does it mean when I say structure makes a painting read? Can anyone define that for me? Sorry about the lag. I have to wait. Makes it function. Function has more to do with anatomy and more to do with biology and how biology influences or form sort of represents biology, or form represents how an eye blinks. You have to think about the structure and the function there. I'm talking about composition. I'm talking about the structure that sits underneath everything you're ever going to paint, that 3D object that sits under it. It gives it sentience, so it could read like humans. So a clown in the class. Or seem like a physics project, makes it function. Perceive a 3D object. When you zoom out and something reads, what does that mean? When you zoom out, you're seeing only the what? The largest what? They're not complicated questions. It reads as thumbnail. So yes, thumbnails, definitely that's exactly what you're trying to do with thumbnails is you work zoomed out and you're trying to capture the most important high points and low points and values. So the values and form reads from a distance. Thank you, Emmanuel, for answering like anyone else. So what does it mean when form reads from a distance? It means that if you zoom out and you still see a head, you still see a neck, you still see some beautiful crisp cast shadows, you see some high points, you see some three-dimensional characteristics to the chest, to the neck, it means that your structure is spot on. If you zoom out and it still reads, it means you're not depending on the detail, you're not depending on the decorations. So how do you ensure that you're always going to be working with structure in mind? The answer is you zoom out of your painting. Don't zoom in, don't worry about the details too early, because the details will not carry the form. Eyelashes, drawing tiny little eyelashes like you've done here, makeup and mascara is not going to carry the form of the portrait. What's going to carry the form is when I zoom out, am I reading anything right now? Am I really seeing, I'm seeing too much of a contrast, not enough shading, not enough protrusion, not enough structure, not enough form. This means that you really are depending on the detail to deliver your painting. If I were to get rid of this detail, we really don't have much going on in this painting. When is the best time to zoom in? The best time to zoom in is when you are finished with all of so when you paint with a large brush, it does not mean that you're painting messily. It does not mean that you have to paint like a messy way. That's not what painting with a large brush is. Yeah, your painting can look a little bit messy early on, but it doesn't mean that you have to paint like a messy, like you have to paint like a painterly or impressionist style. You still have to render. You still have to, with your large brush, try to encapsulate the direction, the sharpness of the main cast shadows. So when I say the cube, when I refer to the cube, I'm saying the biggest shadows responding to the biggest light. Everything has that, so don't tell me that your drawing doesn't have that unless you're using like 4 or 5 light sources and they're all diffusing the main core shadow. Like, unless that's happening and the person is glowing, then you can't say that to me. You have to, even if it's 2 light sources or 3 light sources, there will always be a prominent primary light source casting one really large shadow across all the forms. So when you dealt with that shadow, you dealt with the primary, you cleaned it up nicely with your big brush, you've diffused it properly with the secondary light source, you've sharpened it by shrinking your brush even just a little bit, just a couple sizes smaller, just to make sure the cast shadows are sharpened. After that, you can start shrinking your brush because you have to start investing some information. Information equals detail, meaning it's time to add an eyelid. It's time to add a collarbone. It's time to add an eyebrow. That's when you start shrinking your brush, when the demand and the detail call for it. So when do you start shrinking your brush? Yes, and always look at the navigator. Absolutely, Kuro. Absolutely. Always look at the navigator. Hi, Crupsley. When the detail demands it. What does that mean when the detail demands it? So don't just repeat what I say. Explain it back to me. When you're done with the shadows and the core shadows on the large brush and they read from a distance, you're done with the thumbnail. After the main shapes, the smaller shapes. So that's when you start detailing. When you're done with the large cube and there's tiny little cubes attached to it, like little binary or like little baby cubes. So you've got the main cube, and then you've got the little baby cubes. The baby cubes can be a nose. The baby cubes can be the top lip. The baby cubes can be the cheekbones. That's when you start shrinking your brush because you have to start drawing some smaller baby cubes on top of the big mother cube. All right? Okay, so let's actually start painting. Do you zoom in or stay zoomed out? Alright, so I've been painting a lot lately, and I've been asking myself that question too. When do I zoom in and when do I zoom out? Sometimes I feel like if I don't zoom in, I'm going to destroy what I've already drawn. So if I don't zoom in, I'm not going to, with enough accuracy, create that level of information. So when I zoom in, I usually zoom in on eyelids. I zoom in a lot on eyelids because I feel like there's only so much space in the eyelid where you can really place in some highlights. So I usually have to zoom in to make sure I'm placing it in that exact accurate spot. So accuracy, when you detail and you need to zoom in, is when you need accuracy. When you can't afford a misbrush, you can't afford a misstroke. Alright? That's when you should zoom in. Other than that, you can paint the entire painting with this level of zoom in. You can paint the whole thing like this. If you want to make really large brushes, let me create when yours this zoomed out, your brush should be this big. Alright? Your brush should be between this size and this size. Meaning you're using this brush to stroke in some really major shadows. Some of the major shadows. So this is how zoomed out you are. When you zoom in another step, your brush will shrink. So you start to bring in more information. When you zoom in another time, your brush will shrink. Alright, so you start bringing in more detail. Zoom in another time, and this is pretty much how small your brush should always stay, because this brush here, especially with transfer and pen pressure turned on, can take care of nearly all of the details you're ever going to need. Only time you really need to zoom in is if you're drawing like pearls, or if you're drawing like something really small where you want to throw in that little illumination here. And you want to draw some pearls or some bubbles. That's when you really, really zoom in. But you always have to make sure you zoom right back out. So do you see what I mean by the power of zooming out? You control your values, it can read from a distance, you encapsulate the form, and detailing will not carry better than your large strokes. They will not carry better. It's like having a boat. You need the boat to be significantly large in order to carry many, many small things. The many, many small things will not float on their own. They will not read on their own. The large form structures that you draw with, the large brush strokes that you use are what are going to carry the form. I think I just went ESL there for a sec. So again, let me just start painting here. Alright, so we fixed the hairline. If you can see, you didn't think about the form. You didn't think about the cube and how that hair wraps around the cube. So that was a bit of a problem. The second area, the biggest sort of shadow in this area, I'm going to keep my brush pretty large, as you can see. So this is how large it should be on this level of zoom out. So I'm going to throw this shadow over all the areas the light is not touching. So I'm going to be casting some shadows. Shadows are going to be cast off this eyebrow, cast off this nose. This cheek is going to be a bit covered up. This chin is going to be casting a shadow. Sorry, I have to zoom in. There's because I'm painting over. I'm not starting from scratch, so I still have to shrink my brush because I have to deal with stuff that's already detailed. I don't want to destroy the painting. So casting a shadow off the chin, and then the essential core shadow that falls off half the face, that falls on half the face. On the chin. You're outlining the nose. You do not need to do that. This is a dependency on the symbol. The nose does not have to be outlined. The high point of the cheek will get some light. Just like this. And then part of the forehead. And the space in between the eyebrows. Just like this. So what we've done here is, with my brush, I've painted both the baby cubes and the big cube. Because I'm taking care of the bigger shadows, which are the ones that go half the face. And then the smaller shadows, which are the nose shadow, the eye socket shadow, all that are the smaller cubes that have to be considered. Altogether, the skin is too high a value. So you need to bring it down just a touch. And you're really depending on all of the beauty principles to paint and render your eyes. Try not to make your eyes too beautiful. Try not to make it look like a Barbie doll, because that's very cliche. It's a very cliche look. So if you want to fix that Barbie doll look, all you've really got to do is shrink and break some of those rules and give her some maturity or some distinguished organic sort of pattern to her face. So maybe make her nose a little bit more wide. Enlarge the size of her lips, or change the way they sit, and get rid of that baby cheek if you want to give her some mature. She looks like she's very mature. So babies have that signifying little bulge in their cheeks. So if you don't want your character, which is supposed to be a grown woman, to look like a baby, you gotta sort of show the sinking in of the cheek because of the enlargement of the skeleton. As you grow older, your skeleton gets bigger. Your skull gets bigger, so everything gets hollowed out. Alright, so before, a bit like a baby, like she was 15, or not 15, like she was like 11 or like 5, but really with a lot of makeup. And after, now her makeup seems to match her face a little bit better. So that's just a small suggestion. I would not shrink the lips widthwise, I would shrink them lengthwise. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the secondary light source because right now the most important thing is the primary light source. Nothing is more important than the primary. So that means that nothing's more important than the shadows the primary light source is casting. I'm also going to throw one consistent color over the chest area. Have I critiqued this yet? I haven't critiqued it yet, have I? I don't think I have. Quite confused. Okay. So the shadow off the neck is going to be cast here. And what you're doing here is you're outlining. Look at that outline that this person did. Shame, shame. You don't need this outline. You just need the edge. Take that shadow all the way to the edge. Take the background color and just clean that up. You don't need a line when you have edges. Edges take care of the form. They take care of showing us where this object starts. It's an edge. It's where the object ends. So if you have an edge, why would you need a line if you're showing where that shadow is? Where that, whatever it is that's ending. So I'm just trying to keep, sorry about the soft brush. I don't like that dreamy look. But I have to. It gets the job done. So the shadow here did not need an edge to it. It starts off right at the edge where, a line to it, sorry. It starts off right at the edge. I'm also going to fix the shoulders in a second. Filter, liquefy. So the shoulders are completely asymmetrical. Oops. Completely asymmetrical. And I'm going to try to make the dress seem like it's sitting around her chest so that it goes in front, because it's sitting around the breast area. If you make it too flat, it won't seem like, again, the same thing with the hair wrapping around a solid form. You have to show that the fabric is the dress that's wrapping around the original object that's underneath it, which is the chest and the body and the torso. So it wraps around its altitudes and its valleys. So if you identify where these high points are by doing form studies are really good for helping you identify the high points and low points of core shapes. Really, really good for that. I recommend form studies for everyone. So I'm just trying to make sure everything matches. So basically drawing and fixing the fabric all in one go. So her sleeves will puff up a little bit. Gotta zoom out. Okay, they sink in just a little over here. Okay, so it does look a bit more stiff, but before it was very, very asymmetrical, and now she seems to have more of a symmetry going on. Diana asks, this is going to sound stupid. No, it's not a stupid question, but how do you do form studies? Form studies is like it's like sparring. You get a random shape thrown at you that is a silhouette. It has no shadows or lights, and what you have to do is find its shadows and lights. Or I posted oh, actually, did I post it? Yeah, someone posted on the Google community some colored form studies. Photos, actual photos of cubes and spheres and cylinders that are red, blue, and yellow. You can just grayscale that and then just study off of that. You don't have to invent your own shapes. That's like sort of a more advanced form study type. You can just get like still lifes. Basically, that's what a form study is a still life. Doing still lifes gives you it gives you experience with numerous situations of light color on shape and form. So it helps you understand and render the edges better. It helps you understand color and cast shadows better. So doing still lifes is just as much effective as doing freestyle form studies. Okay, so still lifes. You can draw a cup and it'll be a form study. You can draw a book and it'll be a form study because you're studying the form. Form isn't everything. Okay, so I'm just continuing this. I'm sorry, it's sort of messy. Alright, so this area here has edges to it. So the edge of the shoulder will end right there, and that's where that light will stop. It will get really bright over here, but some stuff is going to pop up and catch some light as well. So the breasts are going to do that. Please, if you use if you use a shadow already, basically, when you guys are drawing, I really need to get this chest, the collarbone video made, but when you guys use any shadows on the face, there's the same shadow colors that you're going to use on the body. There's no reason why you should choose a whole new set, a whole new palette of colors on the body and arms if you've already used those colors on the face. There's no reason for you to change them. The same palette that you use for the face is perfectly fine for the body. Yes, the body may be paler. Yes, the body may have more greens and purples to it, but you can also add and accessorize after and customize those areas and add a little bit more color so they can suit the biology of that certain area, geographical location on the body or whatever. Not geographics, that means Earth, but whatever. You know what I mean. So just like this, sort of not as bright as the face, of course, because the face is the brightest, and then we've got the collarbone also interrupting that shadow. So as you can see, I threw a basic base tone. So I threw like a base tone over everything, and then I added the highlights on top. There never needs to be like a jousting between all of the colors you have in your palette. You don't need to go crazy and have splotches here and just make them blend and you think it looks good. Sometimes it's just layering of like cake, when you're making a cake and you just throw layers on. Sometimes you just have to start with the basic stuff and just very, very neatly just start layering in all of the stuff that comes up. So all of the detail, the small cubes, the information. So this collarbone here is a small cube. and it's casting a light over. So you see how consistent everything is starting to look. See this beautiful cast shadow? It reads from a distance. Better than what was before, where you had just white splotches for skin, everything else wasn't really matching. And this cast shadow, guess what, travels all the way. Doesn't end at the skin, it continues onto the body. Just like this. Covers the body. This cast shadow doesn't care whether it's on skin or not. It's an interruption of the light, and the light touches everything. Also a bit too saturated on this area here. The dress. The ear needs to be a little larger. It needs to hover in between the line of the eyes and the nose. Good job though, absolutely. If I were to choose my favorite, of course the eyes would be my favorite. Not just because they're eyes, as you know, I love painting eyes, but because of the gaze. The gaze really reads. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but the gaze absolutely feels so confident. It really has a powerful look to it, so good job on that. The gaze, like G-A-Z-E, not G-A-Y-S. Gaze, gaze. God. Okay, so a recommendation for the eyes, please don't overdraw that outline that is on the eyes, that black line. You don't really need that as much as you think, because it's just a small little discoloration that when you're zoomed out, the eyes aren't that good. Our human eyes aren't that good that they will see that tiny little thing in such contrast. It will kind of blend with everything. And so the blues of the eyes, the whites of the eyes are surrounding these black lines. And so they'll eventually fade them out because our eyes blur things when we're in the distance. The pink in her lips, I'm going to bring some of it onto the waterline, and that'll give the eyes some realism as well, because eyes have that redness to them. Not too red, of course. It's like a pink. It's like a pale gray pink. And then, of course, the shadow of the eyes that I always talk about, the shadow of the upper eyelid on the rest of the eyes. So you don't have to outline the eyelid. So what you guys do is you draw eyes, and then you draw the eyelid, and then you leave that line there. That line is a leftover line from your line phase. What you do is you bring that light color on the upper eyelid, and this line you blend it up. You don't continue that line. You don't preserve that line. That line is a placeholder until you locate the edge. Does everybody know what I just said? Does everybody understand that? What did I just explain? Catching you slackers off guard. Place lines with edges when rendering. Replace them in the direction of the shadow too. So just find where the light is, and then you'll know how to blend that line out. Okay, as for the lights on the eyebrows, they need to show, they have their high points in the eyebrow bone, so they need to sort of point to that on switch I talk about. Just like this. Right over top. Do you see this? This is where you place that light. That just because you draw an eyebrow doesn't mean that light is underneath the eyebrow at all times, no matter which direction the light source is in. Now that light is separate from the eyebrow. They don't come hand in hand. Stop thinking eyebrow and then light, eyebrow and then light, eyebrow, and that's not how it works. That light point is the underlying shape, the structure, and the eyebrow is the accessory. You shade the eyebrow structure first, and then you lay the accessory on top. So draw the brow bones before you draw the eyebrow hairs. They'll tell you where the high points are. Okay, just shading that out. I always forget to erase my mess. Sorry about that. Right, and I'm going to get some of the background color and make it bleed into the face because that face edge is not strong enough. Alright, some reflected light, so maybe some secondary light jumping off the sides, jumping off the walls, diffusing the shadow, so it would be a little sliver along the side of the quarter, this quarter of the face, the final quarter here on the side, which would create a nice clash. Look at this clash line. What does this clash line remind you of? Does this clash line remind you of anything? Right here. It would be right along here. What does it remind you of? What does it look like that's already on the face? So can anyone answer this question? It's kind of hard. Cheekbone, good job. The cheekbone, but like which cheekbone? Where? Where on the face? The other cheekbone? So this line here, this clash, is reminiscent of this exact silhouette. So many of you forget that this silhouette on the face looks exactly the same if she were to turn the other side. We'd see this again if it's a symmetrical face. So some of you, when you throw in a clash between a secondary light source, you do something like this, where it's this low, or you do something like this. What you're supposed to do is mimic this exact edge because that's the actual edge of the cube where we're not seeing any light come through. So that's where this secondary light source is going to end. I'm pointing to the screen like you guys can see me. This is where the secondary light source will end, on this edge that we see here. Alright? So if you're asking, okay, I'm putting the light source on, where do I stop? You stop at that point where the face has an edge, which is right along here. It doesn't have to be this edgy. It doesn't have to be this chiseled. Her face can be a little bit softer. You can make it a super soft secondary light source and a super soft edge, just like this. But essentially, do you see I'm following this edge? Okay? Did everybody just understand what I know it can be a little bit complicated. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just casting this edge over here. This is the line where the face is nearest to us. Yes. Alright, so I'm continuing this cast shadow and I'm going to diffuse it. You see the shadow is sharpened? The closer it gets to the light source. It's also following the cylindrical shape of the neck. So the neck isn't this, it's this. So that's what the shadow is going to do. Okay? And I'm going to get the secondary light source. Now I'm going to go in and throw that purpley color that you had earlier. I'll color it in the color modes. But basically, you just have to find the side of that cylinder on the neck. And that's basically where you throw it. I can just throw the messiest line in, just like that. That's pretty messy. And I'll just erase away what I don't need. Whoopsie. Wrong layer. So just like that, I'll throw that in. That's my diffuse. That's my secondary light source. And this line here is my clash. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to diffuse that shadow very, very delicately, and everything stays soft. Everything stays, really, really careful with how hard these brush strokes are because I don't want to mimic a line. So really soft in the sense that my brush is large. You can use a textured brush. It would still be technically a soft stroke. Alright, so do you see that? That's a much better secondary light source because what it's doing is it's working with the structure. So no matter how deep into the painting you are, if you're 5 hours in, if you're 8 hours in, you're still thinking about those first cubes you drew the first 5 minutes. It doesn't mean you forget about them. Just because you started drawing eyelashes doesn't mean you graduated into the elite and you no longer want to think about important stuff that started you out, which is basically those cubes and cylinders and spheres. So don't forget your roots, guys. Go back to your roots. Okay, so you see not much really happening with the collarbone, but it reads as a collarbone. And did you see me zoom out like significantly, unless I'm talking about the eyes, but did you see me zoom out like a lot? I didn't need to. I didn't feel like I needed to. Because my brush at this point, when my brush is, I'm zoomed out either here or here, I feel like I have control. Like it's stable. And you see the cast shadow is sharpened and sharper the closer you get to the light source, and way more softened and way more fuzzy the further you get. So look up a good reference for the chest area. The chest you drew was a bit sort of challenged. So you have to make sure you're filling your mind up with the right kind of information so you remember better. If you look from a picture, you'll remember better than thinking just with your head. You won't be able to remember as well. I think that's enough for the boobs. Alright, so if you want to make it a colored, you have either the option of painting it in directly with the brush. I think you chose like a purpley cyan kind of color for the secondary light source. I don't recommend that color for the secondary light source, but it's okay. So you just have to either you paint it in directly or use the color mode, which is layer mode color. I'm just throwing it in messily. I'm not really worried about how it looks because I'll just erase it all away and just keep what I need. And that'll bring in a sort of second color. You don't really need it. I recommend something a little bit more warm, or something that'll tackle the primary light source, or the primary colors. So maybe something turquoise or green to tackle that red, or something pink to complement the red. If I were you, I would just leave it beige, which is where we have it now. Alright, so some more stuff on composition. The hair should fade off into the dark, just like this. If the room is going to be this, you've chosen a really dark background, by the way. Don't know if you noticed. So this whole area is dark, and the reason why you even need a secondary light source is because it's that dark. So the secondary light source is brought in when the core shadow is so dark the picture is starting to flicker, because you see it's starting to disappear. That's when we bring in our secondary light source. So that's the purpose of a secondary light source, to diffuse the core shadows, the trouble the core shadow has caused, which is flooding away or drowning the image or drowning the form. That's pretty much when we use core shadow. Secondary light source. But you first have to have the darkness required to qualify. You have to qualify for it. You have to apply and then wait a couple months. Okay, so again, same with the primary light source. The secondary light source has hot spots. So wherever the light is pointing, that's the brightest spot. Further away from the light is less light. It's more dark. Okay. As for the entire image, as for like me talking about the image as a whole, I don't recommend green against blue, or red. I don't recommend green against red. I don't recommend this kind of sort of, like you're drawing hair without a reference. The hair needs a reference. I don't recommend you even just painting masterpieces, I don't recommend it right now for you as the artist, because what I see you suffering with is a lot of form trouble and a lot of structure trouble, and you're not that familiar with the face yet. You're really depending on the Barbie doll face. There is no significant amount of influence from realism, so all your faces pretty much probably look the same right now for all the girls that you draw. So you are in a student stage. You are in student phase, meaning that everything you make right now until further notice has to be a study. It has to be homework. You can't try to draw a big Da Vinci masterpiece if you don't even have enough importance invested in your shapes. Like if you haven't even done a still life yet. If you haven't done a cube, if you haven't drawn a cube, if you haven't drawn a cylinder just for the sake of drawing a cylinder, you don't need to uh, like if you haven't done that, you can't go to the masterpiece stage. So as for doing masterpieces, completely just forget that. As for trying to put head with hair and hair with clothes and with lighting and all that really complicated staging, that's not what you're ready for right now. You're ready for some cube studies. You're really good with your faces. You're set. Do a 14-day challenge. Do a month dedication only for painting faces so you can get better at that. Do a dedication for the collarbone and the chest area if you really want to get into portraiture, if you want to be a portraiture artist and you just want to draw faces and upper body faces all the time. If you want to be known for that, look up some photography. So just bring in some other stuff that might help you. So look up photographers that only do portraits and see how the lighting interacts with the face and how the photographer diffuses the shadows. As for colors, as for painting with colors, so that green and that red, really misguided use of those two. The skin is really, really pink. It needs to be a little bit less pink, more yellow, so you have a color issue as well. So that's a lot of stuff for me to diagnose for you, and it's a lot of stuff for me to throw at you, whoever you are. Sorry, I don't remember who these posts come from. No one names them after themselves. So your colors as well, you need to do some individual colors. So saying that, I recommend working in grayscale from now on. So the 14-day challenge, all the form studies, all those still lifes, do them in grayscale. Because for now, just deal with shadows and form. Color is an additive that it can really confuse you. It can really slow down your progress. So just put color on for another day. For now, just work on grayscale and form structure. So let us do the before and after. Okay, so before, after. So does everyone see the differences? And this came only severely just sourced from the knowledge of the cube, of the structure. So if any of you think that the structure stage in the painting is the stage where you rush through, you're wrong. Spend less time on details. Spend less time on eyelashes, on eyebrows, on the little sparkles in the hair, and spend more time on those long shadows, those large gradients, those illuminations, those hot spots in the face, the function, the cast shadows that represent function. So the eye sockets have cast shadows that come out of them, and they fall on the eye, and the eyelash has a cast shadow on the eyeball, and the eyeball has a cast shadow on the cheek. The nose has a cast shadow on the face. The lips have cast shadows on each other and on the face. The neck has a cast shadow on the body. That's a lot of stuff to think about and practice. So the stream is almost done, Zippity. It's actually not long today. It's almost finished in like a couple minutes. So that's what we did today. That's what we applied to this painting. So before, very representational, not much sort of concentration on symmetry or function at all. Yeah, that's it. What, 2/3 basics, 1/3 details. Absolutely. Even less, 3/4 basics and structure and large brush and not zooming out in the last quarter of your time. So if you're spending an hour on a painting, 45 minutes, is that how it divides? 15, 15, 15, 15? 15, 15, 15, yes. So 45 minutes on the basics and the large strokes zooming out. And then the last maybe, so 45 minutes on this or this, and then 15 minutes probably on this. And then you can just multiply that if you're going to do 6 hours or 7 hours. Leave the detailing for later. You are not ready for masterpieces, so just focus on your form and structure so all your paintings have this much of an influence and this believability and realism to it. All right, any questions? I'm just sharpening because that soft brush causes havoc. Filter, sharpen, sharpen. I'm late, right? Yes, you are. The class is almost finished. Any questions? No questions at all? Doing serious math here. I'm not very good with math. It's all about art for me. I'm sorry, Reuven. If you want to catch the next one, it's on Thursday, the 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Ista, do you erase from the core shadow for secondary light source, or do you draw over core shadow with lighter color? You draw over. This comes from your experience with layers, yes? Don't use a different layer for a core shadow. The core shadow is a base tone. It's one of those important big Titan, those early veteran three colors that you choose, light, medium, and dark. That dark is your core shadow. So those veteran three colors that you start off with, they should be on one layer together. They have a relationship, a very delicate relationship, and if you mess up with those colors too much, you got to jump from one layer to the other. That's too much of a hassle. It's an extra obstacle that you have to deal with. For me, myself, I've been trying to force myself to paint my whole painting in one layer because I've grown a real dependency on layers. So absolutely keep it on one layer and paint over it. Layer your stages. But layer them on one layer, meaning like damn, the use of that word layer is so use one layer, but on top of that, no, one layer and then just add and paint over on that one layer, okay? So as the stages come, so the secondary light source should not be painted as you paint your core shadow. Paint your core shadow, paint over. Thank you, Akru. As you paint your core shadow, you should not be painting your light source or secondary light source. So if you're doing this for your shadow color and then you get another color and start doing this for secondary light source, this is wrong. Paint your core shadow in first. Get those main shadows going. Clean it up nice and this is when you're zoomed out, by the way. This is when your brush is this big. And then after, when you're sure you're done and you start drawing the smaller baby cubes, that's when you start bringing in secondary light source, like this one, to diffuse. You see, this isn't that bright. It almost seems like it's the same color, but it's really creating a big difference for the form. And this just comes in later. It's like bringing in detail. Okay? When do you know when to stop? I have a habit of overworking a piece. I'm not even sure what you mean by overworking. When you're at that zoom out level where you want your audience to be, if you have enough information on that zoom out level that people can read, you're good. So if you want your audience to see 600 by 600, or if you want your audience to see at 800 resolution, if you're going to print it out and post it on a big poster, you're going to have to keep overworking it. Because if you're going to print out a big poster of that painting, they're gonna see everything. So if you don't have enough detail, it's going to look too messy. It's going to look like a big blob. So it depends. How do you want your audience? Do you want your audience to see at this zoom out, at this zoom out? So stay on that zoom out. Look at it. Does anything feel like it's not finished? Does anything feel like it's done? Stop there and go on to the next thing. That's pretty much my tip for knowing when to stop. And that's it. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day. Bye-bye.